So I've never heard anybody mention the association between the two before. So I just typed into Google Tolkien. I typed in Tolkien and Sheila and a Gig. So we've got what is a Sheila and a Gig. There's a book about Sheila and a Gig, nothing to do with Tolkien. Another theories page, doesn't mention Tolkien on there. Nothing on there. Now, there's an archives thing here, but when you open this, this is lots of different separate things. This is loads of different articles, so I don't think that it's in the same article. And then there's only 2 more sites, and this is a book that somebody's written about poetry, landscape, the politics in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Now, this is the bibliography at the end, and this only mentions random things that were in this book. Now, Summit cited the Celtic Sheila and a Gig, and then later on, we've got Tolkien cited in this book, Angles and the Britons. So it's not a direct, acknowledgement. And then here, this other reference, Tolkien, JGR 149, page 149, and the Sheila and the Gig, find S. Sheila and a Gig 56, so it's page 56, and Tolkien's on 149. So it's not, they're not together in the same reference. So I've watched a few different interviews with Tolkien, and I've watched a few different interviews with his family and friends and people who have written about Tolkien, and I've not actually, he actually does go through the influence, and Tolkien claims that he wanted to use English influence and English mythology, but there wasn't any. He claimed there wasn't any, so therefore he used other, Norse and other mythologies, Saxon and Danish mythology from other countries he used in Lord of the Rings. But what all I find is, when I look at it, is that it's full of old English mythology. All these words and languages that he used. Yeah, surely they're foreign, but I find all the themes are actually English, and I don't feel that I don't think that's an accurate statement for them to say they couldn't find any English ones. And we know the video that I've done about Castle Hill and the Victoria Tower and Emley Moor Mast, which are 2 marking stones of Tolkien's lifetime, really, and he did study in Leeds, so he will have been to Castle Hill actually. And the actual shape of Castle Hill being part of the Sheila and a Gig, this almond shape, this like almost eye shape, it's quite significant to have incorporating the eye into the tower. Now, with the Sheila and the Gigs, yeah, it clearly is. To me, there's no question about it. It's Gollum. It's Gollum, and Gollum's holding the ring. He's obsessed with the ring and holding the ring. And some of these Sheila and the Gigs, some of them have a circular one, but the majority of them have this almond shaped one, but it's all, it's still a ring, and it's the fact that it's a grotesque character who's holding on to it, and that's really what happens in Lord of the Rings. Gollum's like holding on to the ring, or wanting to keep hold of the ring for a long time. Basically, literally, these statues in stone is a statue holding onto a ring for literal eternity, which is what Gollum did for a long time. So I can't believe you can type that into the internet and you don't see somebody actually writing it. It would have come up on the first page of Google. So no one's actually, from what I've seen, particularly in the videos that I've watched, no one's actually said this, And I think that's partly due to brain fog. I'm not saying people can't make the connection, but, you know, from what I've seen, and there's actually a girl who does a lecture on the Sheila and the Gigs, but it's about an hour long or something, lecture, and I started watching it and I got a bit bored, so I'm going to watch that tomorrow and see if she even mentions it, and if she doesn't, in an hour lecture on them, then, you know, that's an important thing to point out. And I actually think that these were done just entering the Norman period as a kind of mockery against the Normans, or a mockery by the Normans, one or the other, because there was a lot of religious conflicts and they did a lot of horrible things. So it does look like it's older than that, even older than the Normans, but they're saying they're from around 1100 or the year 1000. So, and there's some significance to do with this and those Irish round towers, you know, that they're around the same period, or the Irish towers maybe a little bit earlier. So that's just one other thing. Hi, it's me. So I've got, actually, someone's sent me very kindly, and actually I think it was quite rare and unique coincidence of circumstances how I've managed to actually get a copy of this, because this is the 6-page writing by J.R. Tolkien that he did about the Huddersfield area and its dialect. So obviously being from Huddersfield and only recently been led onto the path of Tolkien, really, from his time in Leeds, and because I knew of his interest in the Uffington White Horse, because he did spend time there when he was younger, and the Uffington Camp and Wayland Smithy, ancient English sites, and I've actually been there, so I've actually been to those sites and many others. I've actually been finding it necessary to kind of look into Tolkien, so I watched his interviews, because they're on YouTube, all his BBC interviews and his other interviews, and I listened to what he said, and I listened to his opinion, and I thought that it was quite in line with my own opinions, and what those opinions are actually to do with England itself and the ancient sites, because Tolkien liked the ancient sites of England, had an interest in them, and obviously some of these themes play out in his novels and in his fantasy writings, but they clearly are, you know, loosely based on things around us. So I looked into where Tolkien lived when he was in Leeds, and I actually went there because I know I had in Leeds anyway, and the streets that he lived on, and, you know, the cricket ground, Headingley cricket ground, and then I obviously come to realise this friendship that he had with Haig, who wrote this dialect book on the Huddersfield dialect, and it's no coincidence that Castle Hill, with the Victoria Tower on it, next to the Pennine Hills, being in Huddersfield and being the main prominent feature of our area, is not unlike, really, the tower. And I've done some videos on this on my channel, which I'll put the links to that. It's not unlike the Tower of Sauron next to the Fire Mountain, which is kind of like next to the Pennines, you know, the edge of the Pennines, and then close by you've got the hill with the tower, and the kind of shape of the valley around Castle Hill creates kind of like a little sort of convenient shire, really, a circular shape. And then, so I got more interested in, because Tolkien actually had spent time in West Yorkshire and has got connections with West Yorkshire, I didn't know that this book existed, and I've only just found out about it literally probably within the last week or so. And then I went onto the internet, onto Facebook groups, and asked people locally, and then a guy has got this book, and it's actually, there aren't any for sale at the moment. And it turns out that, you know, Tolkien wrote these 6 pages specifically about our area in Huddersfield, so he clearly has been to our area, and he knows of the site, Castle Hill, and he's obviously clearly seen it, and he's got an interest in it. So I figured it's highly probable that, you know, how he'd base some of his features of his story around it, you know. And what significance has that got outside of Tolkien and his work? Well, we just happen to be trying to save Castle Hill from being built on. The council are trying to put a cafe on there. And we've been campaigning to try and stop and put a cafe in there. And what else ties into this? Well, it's just amazing how these coincidences come about in life. You know, my actual surname and, you know, who I am when I've been researching my own genealogy to a certain extent, and my own alignments, you know, because I affiliate myself with the Celtic heritage of, you know, England and Ireland as well. And that's how I come to be in a position where I feel that I need to defend this ancient site. And then when I look into it more, you know, I always kind of thought that the hill was kind of like more like a big ship when you stood on it, 'cause it's like the big ship. But then it turns out that it's actually also quite significant to the shape of an eye. It's very prominently the shape of an eye, and next to it is a place called Farnley Tyres, which is like kind of like Fernley Tears, almost like, you know, tears falling from fern trees. So I actually ended up, well, a local councillor started a petition because he's opposing the council are having arguments over this site as it is, and I managed to help. In fact, if it wasn't for me, we wouldn't have managed to get the 3,000 signatures you need for full council for this site. And I actually went around all the Facebook groups that are associated with ancient sites and, you know, Druidry and all those type of Facebook groups that are to do with even fantasy sites and legend sites, all the different groups possible you can think of in Facebook. And to be honest, you might not think it's many 3,000, but I found it quite difficult. I mean, Extinction Rebellion and some celebrities who are supporting Extinction Rebellion can pull in 100,000 signatures on petitions, but this is only a local petition. So we're actually trying to protect the site. Now, because I knew Tolkien lived in Leeds, and we know that Tolkien has got certain affinity with the kind of, he liked the Nordic language and the Nordic words and the sort of Viking elements, and he clearly states that in his interviews with the BBC, although he doesn't really speak too much about the Celts or Celtic ancestry or history, although the Hobbit holes quite clearly are based around, you know, we all know the Hobbit holes are quite clearly based around like the Bellas Knap and West Kennet Longborough style old Celtic barrows, but he does mention Gawain and the Green Knight a lot in this, which is one Celtic tale. But Tolkien primarily focuses on his inspiration and affiliations himself with the Anglo-Saxons, which is kind of more like the Arthurian connection. But he does, you know, right at the end of this, and now the friendly foreigner cannot better close his wandering remarks than by congratulating Huddersfield on the position at once one of the enthusiasts of such as the author of the book and the generous supporters. So I think Tolkien considers himself as being affiliated with Anglo-Saxons, but actually being a friendly foreigner. Now, the fact is that it's very mysterious that not long after Tolkien was born, that Victoria Tower was actually built on Castle Hill, right? And also, not long after Tolkien received awards, really, the Emley Moor Mast, which is very much like, you know, it's very much like a wizard's tower, and it has the old-fashioned style of a tower. It's a lot nicer style than the Victoria Tower on Castle Hill. So, really, those, in West Yorkshire, those two monuments, really, those two towers, the Victoria Tower really is a good time marker for Tolkien coming into the world, really. You know, it's a close time mark, and the Emley Moor Mast transmitter, the big one, is really a mark of him leaving the world, really, and because it was such a popular and widespread, you know, work, and he was, you know, he was a professional anyway. Those two markers clearly are very significant into Tolkien's lifetime, really, and the fact they had friendships with, you know, people in Huddersfield who were at the Technical College, Hague, and you know, West Yorkshire in general from his Leeds connections. So getting hold of this was very important to me, and I really wanted to get hold of it, specifically to read in it to see if he left or wrote any clues into it about, firstly, his opinion as a professional, you know, if there were any clues or hints about Castle Hill, or if there were any clues or hints to anything in his work or in his literary work, in his writings, what he felt or his opinion or position about either the ancient sites in England or ours. And I'm actually quite happy with this. In fact, I won't say I'm happy, I'm delighted that I feel that when I read it, in my interpretation, it confirms everything that I would hoped it had said and that it would say. And we know for a fact that, you know, if you watch, I think it's James Sainsbury for the South Downs Trust, there's a talk on Cissbury Hill Fort, that Cissbury Hill Fort supplied a lot of England with flint. You know, it was one of the earlier hill forts that supplied the whole of England with flint, because it was a very good supply of flint, for example. So it wasn't only a storehouse, it actually was where they mined flint from and got the flint from. And it says something in that you're actually pulling something out of the ground on a hill fort and supplying the rest of the country. Now, Tolkien does mention at the start of this foreword, and this page isn't numbered, but it's page 13, and then we've got page 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. He does use the words rich storehouse, right? So here we are, he's using the term rich storehouse when he's writing a piece about Huddersfield and Castle Hill. So I believe, and that was my opinion as well, that it was a storehouse, right? And you know, I actually believe that there were, you know, natural growing resources in the area, particularly up on the Pennines, that it suggests may have been collected and used. And if you look at, you know, the English Museum, National Museum videos, Julia Farley, who shows us a lot of items that the Celts used that have actually been dug up and preserved, metalworks. A lot of these metalworks have the mushroom, little, you know, like mushroom shapes made into them. So we know that resource was important and significant to the Celts, and obviously that's demonstrated on the Gunnerstrup Cauldron as well, which was, you know, found over in Denmark. So it's highly suggestive that Tolkien was of the same evaluation and conclusion in his opinion that Huddersfield possibly did collect those resources, because looking at the I've done some videos on the biodiversity, and it does show that the moors, particularly, you know, at a certain height range, have a lot more concentration of these resources, if not the most concentration, but there's definitely more consistency in the concentration of these resources. And if the Celts were using these for religious purposes, then it would suggest that Huddersfield was, you know, a very good resource to collect those materials in them, you know, and the displaying the veneration of these and a lot of the Celtic objects that have been found, particularly ones that Julia Farley talks about, and, you know, and found on the cauldron and things like that. So, you know, the suggestion of the proximity of Castle Hill as a hill, you know, and it's having a distinct boat shape or eye shape to it, you know, and being next to the Pennine Hills is not unlike, you know, the Tower of Sauron being next to this magic mountain or volcano. I think it's, you know, quite significant, symbolic, really. But although Tolkien, you know, he's talking in and he actually talks about considerable lengths of labour that the people from this area might have put into you know, these tasks of collecting and storing things in the past, you know. And then this is his main interest was Huddersfield being isolated and retaining possibly certain phrases and sayings and words in its language that might have been preserved and not lost by, you know, the gradual infiltration by other countries, you know. May even be why he was sent up there and posted up there in the first place to go investigate, you know. It might have been a secondary mission besides, you know, teaching there, you know. And in Tolkien's interviews in the BBC, he clearly he clearly makes it clear and states in the interviews and the various interviews that he's done, in his audio interviews, that he wasn't a great fan of industry and wasn't a great fan of technology, the taking over of technology, and in the destruction of the countryside and you know, the traditional places around the country. He clearly was opposed to this, and he felt it was a bit of a dark force, you know. This bit's a little bit contradictory here. He speaks of an old web, you know, of complex web of oldest, but then he says comparative isolation. So I think he's acknowledging the fact that, you know, there were these webs and connections in the past, trade routes with places like, you know, Sisbury Ring, Hillfort, and Old Oswestry, places like that. And also, you know, but still it managed to be isolated enough where it managed to, for a time, you know, even when the Romans came over, avoid, you know, being, because it's up north, you know, it managed to evade a certain amount of loss of its language and culture, you know. And obviously when they built York, you know, Huddersfield didn't suffer from that. It didn't suffer till later on, you know, until the 1800s when they were building factories and industry, you know. So, but Tolkien definitely, it's clear of his opinion through his choice of language and words, you know, and the great interest that they actually show here. And you know, he's got family likenesses and talks about genealogy and, you know, I mean, I do, and you know, Tolkien's appearance, you know, certain people can probably draw affinity, you know, and with him and how he looks, and also with how possibly that might affect his opinion and his affiliations. So, and then he's got here, you know, history repeating, but he does, the main thing that I wanted to talk about, why I've said this, is just before I just even got into looking into Tolkien, and when it came clearly evident that we needed to defend our local ancient site, I did start looking into the Norman conquest of England, right? And I believe that, you know, he's using words here like, in the description of the stinking sea and foul desolation left by the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. But, I mean, he's using these words. He's using the words foul desolation left by the destruction. So, you see, the Normans who did come, and he's actually used, he actually mentions in here some envy, the envy that the South might have of the North, possibly and likely. He does mean to refer to, you know, maybe envy that the South has, and when the Normans, you know, William the Conqueror had of you know, possibly even our site, you know, if it was quite a significant one. And we know for a fact that William the Conqueror did pretty much rubbish and vandalise Old Sarum, which is the hill fort. It's quite near Stonehenge. He raised up the middle of that and built a fortress on the whole hill fort. And then he comes up here to Huddersfield and they fortify Castle Hill. And then this is when they dig out the trenches in Castle Hill and ruin the eye shape of it, and dig two trenches in, which kind of breaks the eye shape of it, really, and ruins it. And they fortify it, you know, and that is kind of like destruction to it. And then further later on, obviously around the time, you know, Tolkien's born or just after, we get the Victoria Tower being put on there. And there was a lot of dispute about that Victoria Tower getting built. It actually got opposed quite a lot. And the fact that, you know, he does refer to towers, you know, it's not the most beautiful looking tower either. It's quite, it's not a very pretty tower. I think it's quite a grotesque tower, to be honest, you know. So, and where does that bring us now? Well, all this is stuff that I'm researching myself out of my own interest. And then we find that one of the major writers and one of the most famous stories in the entire world, you know, has got elements in it that clearly are loosely based on some features that I'm having to actually have to get involved in now and defend and have my opinion over, because people try to build cafes on there, which represents consumerism, and we've got a very big problem at the moment with consumerism, kind of eroding people and destroying people and getting people unhealthy. Kind of really like the dark forces of Sauron. Really, greed's taking over people, and people are getting very healthy and overweight. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. And the other thing is now, I mean, I did an investigation into the corruption of the police and the government on the highways, and I got a lot of evidence against the authorities and the police. And when I pursued it, I was finding a lot of obstructions, you know. And then what happened is Extinction Rebellion have kicked off with the environment, you know, trying to save the environment and trees from the HS2 line. And we've got all these protests in London. We've got a lot of things happening now, which is, you know, if it's not normal, everyday, run-of-the-mill things. In fact, you could say that there is a global situation happening. And it's not unlike, you know, unlike the story of the Lord of the Rings in a way, all these battles and wars and conflicts, we're actually having America, Germany, England, many countries now, we've got massive protests and rebellions against the government because of what's happening to the environment through the industry and through you know, pollution. And these are the things that Tolkien did care about, and he mentions that in his interviews, in his actually filmed interviews, you know, that he's no fan, and he's definitely not on the side of this dark industry that's taking over and corrupting people, and that's clear in all his stories and writings. And it clearly is a fact that he didn't like the effects of, you know, all these conquests over us and this building of, you know, desiccating our ancient sites and plonking, you know, one-upmanship kind of towers and monuments on the top of them. He's clearly using the wording in this that anyone can understand and read that, and it confirms what I myself think, just as, you know, a local person who's wanting to defend our local history, you know. So basically, you know, that is what I've got from this foreword written by Tolkien, and, you know, I wanted to get hold of it as soon as I found out that it existed, and it, you know, I might not have been able to get hold of it. You can actually download the entire book by Haig on the internet, but this bit that's been removed by Tolkien, this bit by Tolkien has been removed. Maybe for copyright issues, you know, but that doesn't stop me talking about it for research purposes, you know. So, you know, and actually now I've got to a stage now where there are people now who are all over England attending protests in very, very large numbers, and we've got, you know, for example, Russell Brand. He's got an entire channel, and he's got 3 million followers who are very, very focused on the corruption of the government and these big elite entities that are controlling us, like Facebook, YouTube, you know, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. And this is now actually where we get into where I feel I need to make contact with the Tolkien Trust and the Tolkien Company who hold the rights, because actually, Russell Brand now has been talking about Amazon, who's, you know, it's owned by Jeff Bezos, who's wanting to put himself into space, and he's like the richest guy in the world, and he's been making money from other people's. He's just basically a marketplace owner. He's got Amazon, but he's making money from other people's work and other people's skills and produce, you know, on the internet. And then we've had Richard Branson, you know, he's just gone into space because he's wanting to introduce space flights to the rich and famous. I'm more into the fantasy genre because of Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone books, the fighting fantasy books. I was only introduced to Lord of the Rings through my friend, actually, and he got me into Lord of the Rings. And I only ever watched the films and the cartoons of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. I've seen all the films and cartoons. I've never read the whole book. And I'm not really what you call an obsessive Tolkien fan in the sense of his work, you know, just like anyone, you know. The film's pretty good and like The Hobbit and the books. And then, obviously, because of the internet, I just thought, you know, a few days ago, well, I've never really read that Silmarillion, the Silmarillion, but I've heard of it, so I thought maybe I better find out actually what happens in it. So luckily there are a couple of fans on YouTube who have got these Facebook. Well, they've got Facebook groups, but they've got YouTube channels. Sorry. Nerd of the Rings is one of them, and a few others. Now, I was able, therefore, to watch their videos that they've done on YouTube, and then they basically told me the story of the Silmarillion, and some people have done a really, really good job of covering all the different aspects of the Silmarillion and different characters in it. So I've been watching that. And then what the place what I've got to now with it is I found out that they're making new programs now based on all the other works of Tolkien's, you know, the stuff that's previously not been made into films. And then what I found out now is that Amazon are doing deals with, you know, being a platform for people to watch these new Tolkien programs. Now, this is now when we get into political opinion and when you start to feel that you might need to. Because, you know, unless you're just like a fan, a Tolkien geek, you know, then if you're a Tolkien geek, you're probably one of these people who like to write to the Tolkien Foundation and Tolkien Trust and Tolkien Company. You know, I've never felt I need to do that. But now we've gone to the subject of Amazon, who are a big company, who now, you know, Jeff Bezos is kind of recognised, particularly by people who are in opposition to all these big elites who are taking over us and destroying the environment. And actually, we've got a lot of conflict going on and protesting. I feel now that I might have to, well, I'm going to write to the Tolkien Trust and Tolkien Company, and I'm going to complain to them that I don't think that Tolkien himself, with all his opinion, that he's clearly stated his will and intent and opinion in his interviews with, you know, the television channels, you know, it's his recorded opinion, and his recorded opinion here in his writings, that he's not on the side of in big industry and pollution, and he did see it as a dark force, and he was quite opposed to it, right? And I don't think that Tolkien would be comfortable with or like, particularly Jeff Bezos and Amazon, making billions and millions out of people, particularly out of Tolkien's work. I don't think that Tolkien would support that platform. I don't think Tolkien would support Bezos, you know. I think Tolkien would be on the side of, you know, Extinction Rebellion, you know, kind of like Stephen Fry, people like that. You know, in fact, you know, Tolkien would probably, you know, be of the same opinion as people like, you know, Chris Packham and Stephen Fry, you know, these other people who are siding with Extinction Rebellion, you know, and I don't think that they would, well, you know, he's saying that Stephen Fry's released a lot of books and probably sells through Amazon, but, you know, when the push comes to the shove and when it comes to the crunch, you know, and when we know what's been happening to the planet and the environment, I really don't think Tolkien would, you know, be on the side of Amazon and Bezos, and I don't think that he would be happy with his work being sold through there when they're profiting, making massive amounts of money out of his work, you know. And I think that the Tolkien Trust and the Tolkien Company and the copyright holders need to consider that, you know, particularly with all what's going on with the protesting, and and I want to complain, and this is my complaint to him. This is a complaint to him that I don't think Amazon is a platform that they should be affiliated with, and they shouldn't. I don't think that they should sign contracts and deals with Amazon, really. You know, saying that, I released some music and I put it out through Amazon, but at the time I didn't realise what was going on, and then these forces I don't think they're really a force for good, particularly with their blatant disregard for people's health and trying to get people to, you know, succumb to these forces of greed, and it clearly is a force of greed. You know, all these sins that are taking over, and it's really the force that the forces are good are opposing in a lot of Tolkien's work. Now, the last thing that I want to mention is this. I would never have in my life have dreamed of, you know, asking anyone to lend me any money or borrowing any money off anyone. And now I've just discovered this Tolkien Trust exists. I went onto the website only for the reason that, I'm going to complain to him about, you know, Amazon. So I thought I'm going to complain to the Tolkien Trust and the Tolkien Company about Amazon. And when I went onto the Tolkien Trust website, I noticed that clearly they're saying that they are a trust and a charity, but they're saying, you know, they don't want people to start asking them for money and they don't accept applications. Well, you know, I'd never have thought of asking them for any money or you know, put an application to them. And they're clearly saying, you know, oh, we only accept invited applications or whatever. But I'd say this is what I want to say to the Tolkien Trust, you know. I'll say this to the Tolkien Trust is that, you know, actually, we, the local people of Huddersfield, are actually wanting to defend Castle Hill as an ancient site and protect it from being built on, right? And I've never asked anyone for any money to do that. I did lots of work myself and got 3,000 signatures. But what I will say is this, right? If a person or anyone does a petition and petitions to a local council and gets the equivalent of signatures that amount to what 3% of the electorate is, so that you can get signatures from people who pass through the area or use the area clearly, but it's got to amount to the same weight as what 3% of the local electorate is. It'll trigger a local referendum, right? In Huddersfield, we could actually get a local referendum triggered, and it would be possible to do a petition to the local council to get Castle Hill and the surrounding area, you know, just to the edge of the Pennines, and it doesn't have to be, it could be, we could vote on what the exact extent of the area would be, how big the area would be, whether it would be like, you know, 3 mile radius or a 6 mile radius or, you know, even 4 mile radius, right? We could get this Huddersfield area, this shire, this valley surrounding Castle Hill up to the edge of the Pennines, right, registered as an area of outstanding natural beauty. And if we got a local referendum for that, and the people of Kirklees voted for it, so we only need about 19,000 signatures to do that to the local council, which is very easy to do. It's not a lot. I mean, Russell Brand just put a petition on his YouTube video and asked for signatures, and he got 25,000 signatures in like 2 days. So, but that's on a national petition, you know. So I think that it actually, in the name of conservation and new ideas, I don't think anyone's ever done this before. I don't think anyone's ever got a petition to get their area protected as an area of outstanding natural beauty. And our area is eligible for that because we've got an ancient monument that's the highest protection order on it, and we've got the edge of the Pennines, which is a special, unique natural feature on this island. So we qualify for getting it put as an area of outstanding natural beauty, and it would protect the whole area from being built on and ruined by this overtake of industry and dark forces of pollution and corruption. It would protect the area, right? Now, it wouldn't. The thing is, it wouldn't really need any money at all to do this. It could be done very cheaply, and it only needs someone to draft the petition and ask people to get signatures and share it. And people are doing that now. And so, what makes such an endeavour successful is simply, you know, getting people to share it, or, you know, and obviously it's who you are. You know, if you're, you know, Stephen Fry or Russell Brand, you can get 20,000 signatures from people very, very, very easily if you ask them, because you've got a lot of followers and affiliates. Now, I think that, right, I've looked up the definition of what an invitation is, right? And I've put it in the letter that I'm going to write to the Tolkien Trust and to the Tolkien Company, right? The definition of being invited is not only someone asking you themselves, but if there is something that compels you or makes you feel you have to do something based on facts or information from someone, right? So that, I think that, right, this writing of Tolkien's, right, although it's not a legal will in the type and form of a legal will that he would, leave his things to his family, nevertheless, as for what someone's opinions are and their alignments and what they feel and think and what their will, parts of their will, other parts of their will, it's clear from this forward, right, in this Huddersfield dialect book, that Tolkien was affiliated with and aligned with the protection of ancient sites, and his will was aligned against the overtaking of us by industry and pollution and the dark forces that come with that, greed and corruption and people having things in excess. And it's clear that Tolkien in here, he likes and considers himself as friendly to and supportive of the Huddersfield area and our ancient site. So I think that there is evidence here that it is invitation from Tolkien to protect the site from any further desolation. And I actually, if I had some money, and I don't even think that I need any money because I think that there's evidence here in itself, I think that I could prove to the Tolkien's lawyers, I think that I could prove to the Tolkien Charity Trust and their legal team and lawyers that it is Tolkien's will. It is Tolkien's will and invitation through his writing. It is an invitation to protect those sites from further desolation as a friend, and it is in his will to protect not only those sites but the country, from the forces of greed and darkness and industry, which would put him affiliated against people like Amazon, and he would be more tending to issue and publish his work and give access to his work through the public from companies that weren't in excess of greed and promoting greed and causing harm to the environment and through industry. So what I actually want to propose to the Tolkien Trust is this, and it's certainly not uninvited, because this work, Tolkien's own writing in his hand, and this is not fantasy or fiction, this is his writing in real life, in the real world. Tolkien clearly here does confirm his affiliation and will in alignment with what I propose, and it compels one. It does compel one to seek assistance in protecting Castle Hill and the surrounding area from any further desolation, which building cafes on there to promote consumerism and ruining the site itself, not to mention that, is, going to result in. So this, I hereby declare that Tolkien compels me and invites me to ask, here, I am invited to request that the Tolkien Trust do act to help preserve and protect our ancient site. And, and I don't think that I'm not asking for any money for that. I don't think that we need any money, because the Tolkien Trust themselves could quite easily write up a petition. It won't cost them anything on change.org or 38 Degrees or even on the Kirklees Council website, but it'll take them, 2 minutes, a petition, the Tolkien Trust could, for literally next to nothing compared to what other money they're giving out to other people, right? For next to nothing, the Tolkien Trust could write up a petition to make an area of outstanding natural beauty around Castle Hill, right? Because it is in the interests and will of Tolkien to protect such a place from desolation. And they could quite easily at very little cost, next to nothing, share it within their community and ask people to sign it, and they would get 19,000 signatures in literally a click of your fingers, and no extraordinary amounts of money will be required, you know. Literally, it's a matter of they've got the fan base network, click a few buttons to share it, you know, write up a petition, simple, right? And what significance has this got other than Huddersfield? Because it is, everyone now is very worried about protecting their areas. All these Extinction Rebellion people are worried about protecting their areas, and no one has thought of this idea of getting their areas to be registered as areas of outstanding natural beauty, which would completely and totally protect them. Because the Tories at the moment are trying to take away the right to object to building and planning as well. So they're trying to stop people from even opposing industry and plans for the massive expanse of, you know, the industry empire. If we're not careful, we won't be able to object. So even as an experiment for the basis of a new, and many universities, Oxford University, have conservation departments, and they have students who study conservation, and they probably might have a lot of students who are fans of Lord of the Rings and who study conservation, right? So I think as a new experiment in conservation, a local petition to transform a local area into an area of outstanding natural beauty and protect it from any further desolation, particularly one that Tolkien was fond of and is protective over and aligned with protecting in his work and writings, which is clearly an invitation to such an endeavour, in my opinion, and I could prove that legally. The legal definition of invitation is not so narrow, right? I actually believe that the Tolkien Trust have got the capacity, without any expenditure of any money or funds whatsoever, could quite easily lend a helping hand and draft a petition and circulate it amongst their fan base to ask if they will make the area around Castle Hill in Huddersfield into an area of outstanding natural beauty, and get us a local referendum on it, which only needs 19,000 signatures. So if we get 19,000 signatures, then we get a local referendum to make our area an area of outstanding natural beauty. And if it's successful, if the local people vote in favour of it, then this could be a model, an example that other areas that are in dire need at the moment as well, who are really upset and panicking about the loss of countryside, and, you know, particularly Chris Packham and people like that, could then use it as a template, and they can do the same. And we can start getting more areas of natural beauty assigned around England, and start protecting more areas, you know. So this is my proposal to the Tolkien Trust and Tolkien Company, and it's not uninvited, because me finding these 6 pages, I find that in the definition of what an invitation is, I find that I am compelled to contact them and make such a an invited application, and it's not for any funds or money. You know, it's, you know, I think that they could quite easily, at very, very little expense, you know, get this done. And I think that there is, for the part that Huddersfield plays in the history of Tolkien in his life and times, you know, it's here in writing. What else? And I think that the Tolkien Trust and Tolkien Company would be in great denial and you know, failure of Tolkien's will if they chose not to engage and actually assist. You know, particularly when it's not going to cost them anything to do it. You know. So there, you know, I think the Tolkien Trust should act and should be bothered, you know. So I'm going to send this to them and see what happens, you know. Okay, so I just want to do a bit of a talk and sort of quick brief and presentation about Tolkien and his ideas and inspiration behind Lord of the Rings, and I want to explore the possibility of tying it in with certain social and political issues around the history of the island and various different cultures and people who have been in charge of the island, who have ruled the island, you know. Particularly what comes to light is the point in where it changes over from Anglo-Saxon to the Normans. Now, we know that Tolkien is a fantasy writer and an academic. He's well-learned, well-educated at Oxford, and he will have known and studied all the mythologies of England and all the histories of England. Now, he was born in South Africa, but he only stayed there till he was about 3.5, so we're told. Now, I actually didn't know until I started looking into this. I mean, Tolkien fans will know this, but I didn't know this, that he did live in Leeds for 5 years. So, Leeds is in West Yorkshire, and it's near where we are in Huddersfield, which is near Castle Hill. And one of his children was born in Leeds. I think actually one of the actresses who played in one of the Lord of the Rings films more recently, she went out with a guy in Leeds. You know, I don't know what relevance that's got. Maybe she just liked Leeds. It had some history in the Tolkien story. But, so, I've watched some of the Tolkien interviews when he speaks, and nothing in any of his interviews or any of the interviews that any of his contemporaries or friends have been in actually contradicts any of my theories on this. And in fact, everything that Tolkien says, if anything, it backs it up, this theory. Now, one thing that Tolkien says is that he liked English history, but he didn't say there was much of it. So he drew from other countries, you know, like from Scandinavian and other surrounding cultures to add into it. But I think there is plenty of content in Tolkien's work, you know, that does show that he drew a lot from English culture and folklore to use in his Lord of the Rings material. Now, around the time when Tolkien was being born in South Africa, over in England, they were planning to build the Victoria Tower, which is on Castle Hill. That's the Victoria Tower here, right? And it was actually completed when Tolkien was about 7 years old. So this tower really is being thought about and built, you know. It's in Tolkien's early life. Now, it's actually built on a Celtic hill fort, which is the actual hill fort itself. I actually think there is grounds and evidence for looking at it as a huge long barrow. After visiting Bellasnap and West Kennet Long Barrow and all the other sites, and seeing there was lots of different configurations and types of long barrow with different entrances or no entrances, chambered ones, non-chambered ones, different sizes. And the fact that there are no small chambered ones that we know of around, right in the middle of England, they're mainly around the Seven Cotswold Group or the Orkneys or Ireland or Isle of Man, more around the perimeter of the country. I actually think this has got a very, very, very good possibility of being looked at as a huge, enormous, long barrow that is actually hill fort as well. And I've done some discussions about Sisbury Ring hill fort was used for flint mining, so it wasn't necessarily for defence. Well, you've got to defend the flint that you're mining, but, you know, if you're trading it, but not for war, so as such. So the hill forts all had a different specialisation. You know, as Uffington White Horse suggests, you know, riding and training horses in that area of the country's got good landscape for it. So, you know, this particular hill fort could be seen as a giant long barrow that you just go on top of, you know. If you think of all the different long barrows have got to do with energies and ley lines, you know, that this could be one of them going on top of it. Now, We know that this tower was built, and just before this tower was built, we've got this, and this was built very close to Castle Hill at Grange Moor, by Richard Beaumont. I think it's 1766, and it says on it that it's rebuilt, suggesting that it was built somewhere else and then moved. You know, it got knocked down, and it's styled in an Irish round tower. Now, what I found out about this is that I watched a lecture on Irish round towers, and there was some publications, diagrams, drawings of Irish round towers circulating between the 17 and 1800s, because there was a lot of interest in them. And it seems like a lot of men had these built on their estates. There are some people in groups that have told me that I've only just found out this by people in groups who've said that, oh yeah, we've got one of those, you know, on an estate on private land. Now, what I was thinking is, was it the Whig Party supporters who built these, you know, as a show of affiliation to the Whig Party, you know, or was it quite the opposite, mockery? It's worth thinking about that these follies might not be original ones, and they might just be built when those books were circulating because they were fashionable and popular. But we know that regardless of, you know, the intent behind it, we know that this does exist, and it's very near to Castle Hill, Dumb Steeple in Grange Moor. So that's something that has got a top of a tower symbolic to start with as a model. Now, I actually think there's a lot of conflict over these sites through history and through who is in charge of these sites. You know, when the Romans came over, apparently the Romans, you know, were wanting to try and dislodge the power of the Druids. Now, it's clearly obvious that planning and building of this tower on the hill is stamping the authority of the crown of Queen Victoria on this, whereas the other site is more lending to the Irish ancestry and earlier than 1066, just before the Anglo-Saxon period. Now, we know that Tolkien studied the Anglo-Saxons and was a fan of the Anglo-Saxons, and he was against modernisation and a lot of building and expansive building. This was one of the themes behind the Ring and Sauron, you know, was this expansive building. So I think that this switch over from Anglo-Saxon to the Normans is a good example maybe of the evil power of Sauron. And then when I've read a lot of stories about the history of that, and they're saying that there was a lot of raping and pillaging done by the French, the Normans, when they came over, and they put a lot of people through hard times, starved them out, a lot of bad things happened. So I do believe that there's a case for Tolkien drawing on those events in English history to put into his story. When he lived in Leeds, he lived on this road here. And you can see what he will have seen. I think that church will have been there. I haven't actually checked the date on it, but I'm quite certain that church will have been there when Tolkien was living in Leeds. And if that is the case, he will have seen that every morning when he left his house. So it's just this, it probably won't have been that dark because it's actually made out of a lighter stone. If it was brand new at the time, or newish, it would have been a lighter colour, but it's still, we've got this tower theme, something that he looks at, you know, and he was in Leeds for 5 years, but he wasn't at that house for 5 years. I think he moved to a different place further out in the countryside, further away from the centre of Leeds, because that's Headingley, that. Now, the thing with the Tolkien saga is that there's one photograph I forgot to move into this folder, which is of the Shield and the Gig. The Shield and the Gig. I wanted to cover that. So, we know that Tolkien, when he was in Oxford and when he was younger, before he moved to Leeds, he used to go and sit and look at the Uffington Horse and Uffington Camp. And he will have also been to Wayland Smithy. So there's his connection with these long barrows of England and the Hobbit-style house, and having an interest in the prehistoric history and not clearly a love and fondness for them. So when he comes to Leeds, he will have been interested in Castle Hill. Now, Castle Hill, I believe, is before William the Conqueror came over and carved out this trench, these two trenches which separate into sections for when he made the Motte and Bailey Castle and a medieval village, which was before this tower was built and before there was actually a pub at some point on here, free house, public house, which has been knocked down now in more recent disputes. I actually think there is evidence that there's all of the hill forts are very oddly shaped, and they don't really have any uniform shapes in the hill forts. If you study the hill forts like Old Oswestry, Maiden Castle, Uffington Camp, and so on, but this particular hill fort is definitely an oval shape, like a rugby ball shape, and it definitely is a prominent eye shape, I believe, and I think that's significant symbology. It also does look like a flint, and I actually think the top side of it, actually, once the it does look like an almond, but it also does sort of look like the shape of, you know, like the psilocybe silamencia, you know, the magic mushrooms that grow in England, which, you know, are well known for having links with religious connotations. So, you know, I actually think that William the Conqueror separating this hill fort up into sections is sort of like breaking the eye shape in a way, and you could think of that in his ideas in Lord of the Rings to breaking of the ring. Now, this tower was relatively new, as I say, when Tolkien was young, and obviously the planning of the tower probably around maybe around a year or two when he was born, might even been before he was born when they were planning it, 'cause they didn't get it through straight away to be built. So I want to draw just your attention to consider and contemplate this tower and the whole shape of the hill being eye-like, which you can picture this one. You can see it a lot more prominently from angles like this. It's an eye shape, and then it's been broken up, and so we're told by archaeologists it was the Normans who came over and invaded the Saxons who broke this up. They also had Motte and Bailey Castle at Mirfield, which had a little small hill like that, although there's some debate whether it was actually already there as Saxons or whether the Normans built it. But, you know, I'll be interested to get a core sample of this little hill in Mirfield, because that, you know, to see what date it was, because I don't think it's ever been core sampled, you know. It would be interesting to know if it existed prior to 1066, you know, this hill little one in Mirfield, whether it predates, you know, whether it's, you know, maybe a few hundred years older than that. That'd be interesting to know. Here's a BBC production of Lord of the Rings, and here's like the circle shape with the eye in the middle. So I definitely think that for a hill fort, they're usually quite squarish or unusual shapes, never symmetrical or uniform in shape. So this hill fort, and the fact that from the side view of this hill fort, it really does look like a long barrow from the side, but from different views from far away, it looks like a different shapes, because if you're looking straight on at it from far away, it looks like this. And actually, it's got a very majestic view and a very beautiful view with the moors behind it. If you look from Hopton, which is where the Freemasons' Arms used to be a pub. Well, that was a public free house you could go to. And it was a beautiful view of it from that angle, from this angle. But they got rid of that view, and they turned it into some houses that don't even have a nice view of it themselves, like a couple of small windows. And the thing with this here is they also allowed this guy to build this ridiculous mansion with big stone eagles and gargoyles overlooking the hill, whereas the public house had been got rid of, the free house, and this big domineering mansion's been built more recently with eagles, which I think is a bit of a authoritarian gesture, really, against freedom, and it puts itself above the actual site. They could have built a nice picnic area there so people could look at that view, you know. And the road there's not even a very good lay-by. This is to the right-hand side here of what we're looking at. To the right, you would see that amazing, beautiful view, which really it's a view that the whole nation should be able to go and see and look at. But yet we find ourselves with that view being stolen. And the public free house being made private, and you can't even stop outside it or turn around there. And the most terrible, flimsy lay-by here, to look at it from that majestic view, almost non-existent. So it's kind of like the powers that be in the country don't want people to look at it from that view or even stop there. And even there's a sign back there saying high accident route, which I find quite ridiculous, because it says high accident route, but they haven't even gone out of the way to make the lay-by safe to stop and look at this amazing view. It's like we've had it, they don't want this view to exist, really, if they could. So we've got Richard Beaumont with his possibly Whig symbol, and then in one-upmanship to that, then we get the Tower comes along after, which is a royalist gesture, a very big royalist gesture and royalist tribute planted on the hill, which is actually an ancient Celtic site, which William the Conqueror's already separated the eye up, broken the eye up into bits. So when we get to Tolkien, then we've got these themes. We've got these themes of Normans taking over Saxons and subjecting them to, rape and poverty and pillage. So we read in some reports. And Tolkien's a supporter of the Anglo-Saxons. And then we've got this Victoria Tower put on the hill, which is an eye shape. And then we've got the trench dug out, which you find all these symbols in the Tower of Sauron. You've got the eye, then you've got the trench dug out in the top, the U shape, and the tower. If you look here, you can see trench dug out, which is very similar to that U shape in the eye, with the eye. And then you've got the trench dug out there, and then you can see that it's been broken up into sections. So, Tolkien was in Leeds, and he was interested in ancient sites because he went to Uffington White Horse, and he was interested in English mythology for a base for his book. Here we see the tower as portrayed more recently with the magical mountain. Now, the thing about Castle Hill is this. That's looking away from the Pennines. With this view, when you look at Castle Hill and you have the Pennine Hills in the background, the Pennines are a raised area. They're not mountains like Aviemore, like the Cairngorms. That's further up the island where you've got bigger mountains. But it really is like a beautiful shire around the area of Castle Hill. Not unlike Oxfordshire anyway, where Tolkien liked it in Oxfordshire. But you've got these hills, and we know that a lot of those magic mushrooms grow up in the hills, so it's got religious, magical kind of connotations with fairy lore and, fairy mushrooms, although we know they grow all over England, but there are a very, very large amount of them on those Pennines, and I've always been interested to know what the distribution patterns are for these around the country, so we can see if it's true that more of them do grow in these sort of raised up higher areas than in the flatlands of Lincolnshire or whatever. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's another thing just to... And also it's the shape, that mushroom shape is sort of the shape of the front section of the hill after it's been separated up. And actually, funnily enough, the word almond actually is derived from amygdala, which is a central part of the brain that looks like an almond, and the magic mushrooms are supposed to affect the certain parts of the brain. So we've got all this magical, the ring was forged in the mountains, so it always makes me think of Sisbury being the source of flint, because it actually looks like a flint coming up from the south of England. This actually looks like a piece of flint coming up from the south of England, which could be symbolic to flint coming from Sisbury in Stone Age and prehistoric times, but even before the Iron Age, Sisbury was in use, and that's before we were even exploring the island and looking for flint, just as Aboriginal style hunter-gatherers before we even settled and started to mine flint and specialise in certain areas. So we've got these things. Now, smithing a ring, making a ring, a powerful ring, usually rings are by blacksmiths, and we've got two blacksmiths' arms very, very close. There are two blacksmith arms. One of them is overlooking Castle Hill, at a crossroads here, this is another really good view of Castle Hill going down towards Kirkeaton. And Kirk, they chose Captain Kirk for the name of the Starship Enterprise. Kirkeaton is near to Castle Hill. And it does look like a very large vessel or ship. When you're on it, more than anything, more than any of these symbols, when you're on it, it feels like you're in a giant boat, a giant ship that sails on the waves. And if it would have been surrounded by trees, it would look like an ocean of waves, the trees. It would have looked quite beautiful if it had been surrounded by trees. So then we've got the other blacksmith arms as well. So there's 2 blacksmith arms, and there was the Freemasons' arms, you see. The Freemasons, they all command very good views of it. The Freemasons' arms was the best view, and had the conservatory, which is a public free house. Now, there was a public free house actually on Castle Hill itself, but that got knocked down. Now, the pub on Castle Hill was that pub there, and some other buildings just next to it were there a little bit earlier. That was there before this tower, so it would be a symbol of freedom, free house, the public being on there, and then that Freemasons' arms having a good view of it. So to actually get this tower, Victoria Tower, put next to it would be a stamp of authority next to the freedom, you know. And also public houses usually symbolise getting drunk and being drunk, and you know, intoxication doesn't usually lead to anywhere except not knowing what's going on and not having a clue what's going on. So I don't favour the symbols of public houses, even if it's a free house, you know, because when you're drunk, it kind of deprives people of freedom of everything. So anyway, we get this tower, and then he's in Leeds, and you know, then he has his life, and he writes Lord of the Rings. Now, after Lord of the Rings is successful, Tolkien actually, his books are successful. Now, this Emley Moor Mast is also in the area as well. This Emley Moor Mast gets built in the early 70s. And it gets open and starts broadcasting. There were previous masts before this, but only metal frame ones, nothing like this. And this is very reminiscent and sort of invoking of these wizards in the Lord of the Rings story, and the power of the wizards and Sauron Tower. But it's not a black tower, it's a grey tower. So I actually think there's a case for, you know, the powers that be, particularly royal powers that be, not really liking this whole Sauron and an eye story after a while. Maybe if they cotton on to it or whatever, and maybe you know, they wanted a good tower, a big one, and maybe one of the you know, we don't know what the social conversations went like and all these. This was built by one of the knights of the realm and designed, I think. So, you know, we don't know all the conversations that went on in private, what people's motivations were. Even now, today, as we're speaking, people are knocking ideas around. Somebody does a protest in London, somebody makes a comeback with it. There's always this ongoing competition of one-upsmanship. And as the war were in Parliament between the Royalists and the Whigs, you know, the Roundheads and Royalists, with Oliver Cromwell, which was a later story than the Normans' Oliver Cromwell, you know. And then in this, what happens is after this tower gets built, and one-upmanship's the Victoria Tower, a much more kind of stylish-looking tower and more, you know, romantic ram tower-looking tower, Tolkien's awarded with a big award. I can't actually remember the full award, but he gets a proper, you know, like a title from a royal, you know, not a knight of the whatever, but he gets a certain title given to him just after actually this is built and open, not very much around that time, and then he passes away maybe 2 years after. And the two marking points of the life of Tolkien really are the planning and design of this tower and his birth and its building, even though he was born in South Africa, and the making of this tower. And it's meant to be one of the most recognised stories and tales there is in England, you know, the best-selling, most famous story. So these two towers, even though they're in West Yorkshire, even though Tolkien was, you know, living around Oxford, he did live in Leeds for 5 years. These two structures are a big marker for Tolkien's start of life and finish of life. And, you know, academics know this, but I've never heard in any of the Tolkien stories or sagas, anyone specifically talking and discussing this content in this context, they discuss, you know, him getting his languages and his words and his writings from Scandinavian and Norse and his creativity. But it doesn't cover this these specific sites and you know, this digging out of this and breaking the eye shape and it matching his description, you know, of this Sauron. Now, Sauron, let's not forget also, when we're talking about Tolkien and his love of Uffington White Horse and Uffington Camp and Wayland Smithy Longbarrow, which is Smithy, the word Smithy, to smith a ring. He went to Wayland Smithy, smiths a ring. Let's not forget that Sauron is very reminiscent of the word Sauron. Sauron. Now, Old Sauron is a hill fort which is very close to Stonehenge and Woodhenge and Avebury, and we know that that was a very important Celtic site, particularly even the Anglo-Saxons of the Wessex line revered the whole. Even though they were Anglo-Saxons and they weren't Celts, they still revered they had it for a very central part of where they ran the country from. And they liked Stonehenge and, you know, West Kennet Longbarrow and these sites. And William the Conqueror came and he raised this middle section up here, making it a higher section. Again, we've got these themes of one-upsmanship, putting something on bigger and then topping it up with something bigger. We get him coming over, and it's supposedly by history, the historians are saying that it was him who raised this central bit up and built his that's the Celtic hill before, building this dominating city in there with a big church, and as if the church is even more fortified than the central bit that's higher up, you know. Really, I see it as the spread of Christianity across the country with their fortresses of the churches, rather than the Norman French, and particularly William the Conqueror. And there was something going on Ireland with these ramp towers in religion. There's always been exchange between, you know, the Celts and the Romans come over, and then, you know, then the Irish start having their own ideas about religion, but then, you know, William the Conqueror is sent over. So the church are behind a lot of it. As we see here, symbolically. So here we have this and Tolkien states, and his friends and colleagues state, that he was very against this overbuilding, overpopulation, technology, modern things, and you know, expansive building everywhere and machinery. You know, kind of like what the Luddites were against. You know, so this is Sauron building this central bit up, and the ring in the middle, you know. Obviously, a lot of people know this, a lot of people have thought about this, you know, but I hadn't actually heard a talk on it, specifically about it. I thought I'd draw it to your attention, you know, because all the interviews I've seen with Tolkien don't specifically discuss this content. And the fact is, we've got a big issue at the moment with this pub being knocked down because Barry Sheeman wants to build a cafe on there. Barry Sheeman, the MP. Now, Barry Sheeman thinks of himself as a little bit of a local compo, and he likes Compost Cafe in Firth. But next to Compost Cafe, they built Beatty's Cafe, which is more kind of like somewhere where the Queen would go rather than Sid's Cafe. The Queen wouldn't go to Sid's Cafe, the Queen would go to Beatty's. So we've got this Beatty's Beating Compost Cafe, and then Barry Sheeman wants to build a cafe on here now. He actually had, you know, him and this Tandy partnership were supposed to modify the pub, but they ended up knocking the pub down, and the stone went missing, it got stolen. And now he's wanting to build a cafe on there. I think to one-upmanship this Beatty's Cafe, and it's always one-upmanship. And I don't think we should have a cafe on there, because at the moment there's too many restaurants and cafes around, and it's symbolic to unhealthiness and being overweight and consumerism and capitalism, which is what Tolkien was against, consumerism and capitalism. He was very much against overpopulation and machines and stuff. So I don't think Tolkien would have been too happy about a cafe being put on anyway, even if there was a pub there when he was alive. So there's a big petition going at the moment to stop this cafe from being built, and I actually, in my belief, that it's also a very, very large long barrow, which you can see here. I actually think it should be preserved, and I actually think that these trenches should be actually filled in, and it should be restored to the proper shape the hillfort was. We don't actually know what was on there. In Ireland, there are hills that have cairns on them, you know, and like North and Newgrange. I didn't even know there was a place called, I forgot its name now off the top of my head because I've only just found out about it. A lot of these sites, when I used to look for them on the internet around 2000, 2002, 2003, weren't showing up. And I'm a bit upset that I'm only just finding out about a lot of the sites, because I feel like a Chinese man who's, you know, when the government in China block things from the internet and don't let you find out about them. Clearly academics know about them because they need to know about them, and there's certain books you can buy. There's a lot more recently on the internet come up because of Facebook groups, but at the time when I was looking for these sites, I couldn't even find how many there were or which ones there were. Even though there were sites like Megalithic Portal about, those sites weren't that well consolidated at the time, you know. And there's a lot of those Cotswold 7 group long barrows. I've been to Stony Littleton. I went there by complete chance. I've been to West Kennet Long Barrow. I went there because I wanted to. I've been Bellows Nap. I found that on the internet. I'm very upset that that one in Cirencester got ripped down by archaeologists and put in the museum when they could have just built a mod. They could have built like a real one in the museum made out of similar materials, but not the actual one. I think it should remain in the actual site. So it's very disappointing that it features in Indiana Jones. I didn't know which longbarrow that was in Indiana Jones. And I've always been upset that in Indiana Jones they're being taught about Celtic longbarrows and all this history, which I really love. But in school all we got taught about is the Industrial Revolution and shuttles, you know, weaving shuttles and factories and canal boats. We didn't get taught all this really good history, which they would probably got taught in Oxford, you know. So it's kind of disappointing and upsetting. I kind of feel like our government's been a little bit like the Chinese government, really, and withheld information from us. Lots of strange things have happened to me when I've been making videos. Like, I've been making videos and mysteriously something goes wrong and then I lose half the video. This is back in, you know, 2005. I've always thought there's been some force, kind of magical force, maybe like this, the Ring of Power of Sauron working against videos that I'm making, you know. And even now, even when I'm doing some of these talks, when it seems I get onto a hot subject, my phone mysteriously seems to heat up, and I'm like, my phone can't be using that much more processor power than what I was using a minute ago. And why is it when I'm going on a hot topic, my phone goes really, really hot, like this ring, like the ring, you know, and Fredo's got the ring and it gets hot. Whenever I get onto these subjects, my phone seems to start heating up. Sometimes I have to put it in the fridge to cool it down. So I wanted to get a picture of Gollum. And I'd supposed to have put it in this folder so I could start doing this screen record and do this little talk about this folder with pictures. So I've searched the internet and there's no entry where anyone refers to Gollum from Lord of the Rings and the Sheen and the Gig statues. There are 3 or 4 instances where those two names come up in a search. When you go to the website, they're from separate references or separate sources that happen to be on the same website that haven't been correlated together and talked about in context with each other. So, and I've searched, there's one girl who does a presentation in front of a lot of people on a big screen about Sheen and the Gigs. I haven't watched the whole presentation because I grew a bit bored of it, but it's about an hour long. I need to watch it today. And I don't think she mentions Gollum. And none of the Tolkien videos or interviews mention the Sheen and the Gig. All they say is that there wasn't much English history to draw on for Tolkien. Although he was fond of it, he says there wasn't that much English history and culture to draw on because we didn't know much about it. So he drew on languages from further afield, like you know, all our languages are a mix of languages anyway. So, you know, I wanted to have the picture of Gollum in this folder, but I've actually done a separate video about that anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. I did a specific video about that because the Sheen and the Gig is holding on to the ring. but it's not a round ring. It's the oval shaped ring, the rugby ball shaped ring, the eye shaped ring. But the Sheen and the Gig is holding on to it, and technically in the Sheen and the Gig is this grotesque little character that's set in stone, like Gollum. But we never hear people mention Sheen and the Gig when they're talking about Gollum, you know, and I think that's important. So those are a few things, you know. So this hill, I think, unless with West Kennet Longbarrow, you've got to go to the site. With, you know, with Uffington White Horse, you've got to go to the site and walk around the area to get a sense of the site and its bearings and its relation. With Castle Hill, you've got to go to the site. You've got to go to where the sun's coming up here, which is, you know, approximately where, you know, the Freemasons' Arms is, and look at the site from this straight on position to see it, the shape of it and the Pennines behind it, to get a sense of what this site is. And you got to come to this site and you got to see it from the side. So it's like a big long barrow. And then, you know, you've got to know these strange things that are going on, like Freemasons' Arms mysteriously getting shut down so we can't go and see this majestic view, which is here, look, from straight on of the site. It's shut off, and this mysterious person with this big gargoyles and stone eagles is placed, you know, above the hill. Only he can enjoy the view. There's no picnic area there. You know, all these things happen, you know, that people don't correlate together, and there's nowhere to park except a shabby little bit of thing that's barely wide enough for one car, and they've got this high risk route there and stuff. You know, stuff like this. You know, it's politics. It's Barry Sheeman, Labour MP. You know, he's got a stake in it with his Compost Cafe. It's, you know, the Royalists who've got a stake in it, you know, with their Victoria Tower Jubilee. And then it's the Whigs, you know, with their, you know, making a statement, a gesture towards Ireland. Irish Ramp Towers, the Celtic history. Then we've got Tolkien, who comes in, who was born in South Africa, yet he still is Anglo-Saxons. He thinks there's something bad going on with the Normans and what they do to the place, you know, digging all these trenches out. And, you know, maybe William the Conqueror's going the opposite way, you know, he's going for that. But yet, they come out with this tower, and then Tolkien gets awarded, but it's not a black or dark tower, it's kind of a big light tower, as if, you know, the greater good. But we've still got this tower on the hill. And actually, in my opinion, I don't like this tower. I think that the style and design of it is a bit morbid and boring and very kind of authoritarian. You see in Huddersfield, in the town, unfortunately, even though we've got Patrick Stewart with the Starship Enterprise, you know, and his legacy of being from the area and being, you know, the advocate for the university, and then Prince Andrew until he got booted out for being a paedophile. But we've got these. What happens in Huddersfield is we get this big Kingsgate Centre on a place that had the ship in. And this is like a big ship. They destroy the ship in, which is a beautiful quarter of town that could have been beautiful and led down to Aspley Wharf Marina. They bang up a big shopping centre, which is a fortress-looking one, very authoritarian and morbid looking, and a big control tower university that looks like a command centre. And they say they're bringing money to the area, but they're not, because local jobs are really, really poorly paid in that shopping centre. All the money's going to big corporate company owners, and it's big tax. It's big tax for Queen, it's big tax for Tories, it's big tax for government, and it's big money maker for government, and it's a big authoritarian stamp. I don't like it. It's hardly the centre of Cambridge. Punts on the river, which we could have had punts on the river in Huddersfield. It's hardly terrace houses in Cambridge, which are beautiful, and now we've got Ed Miliband popping up on the internet saying, "Oh, we want to build affordable housing, you know." I don't see Rees-Mogg saying, "Well, I'm going to give all my profits and money to charity, and we're going to build you all beautiful countryside houses that are, you know, like beautiful cottages, like in Lord of the Rings, and we're not going to make any profit out of them. I'm going to give all my money away, Rees-Mogg, and so is Boris, and where all the Tories are going to build everyone beautiful houses for cost price of building, and we're not going to make a profit on it just because we love you all. And we're not going to build all these new crappy rubbish housing estates everywhere and destroy our countryside. We're going to make the countryside, we'll keep the countryside, make it better and more beautiful. And we're not going to use this crappy American model of, a shopping mall and McDonald's because we've got far too much food already and we're all fat, overweight and greedy fat pigs. That's what Tolkien would have supported, that view, because he was against this Tory greed and overproduction of machines, Tolkien was against that. Tolkien, I think, would have favoured, my sort of viewpoint, I think. So this is a little talk I wanted to do. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying I'm wrong. I'm saying there's some content here that I don't think has been covered in the Tolkien interviews. I don't think the Tolkien interviews rule this out. I think the Tolkien interviews support this. And I think Tolkien being in Leeds supports it. And I just wanted to point a few things out. Because people who are voting on Castle Hill and signing petitions for Castle Hill, a lot of people like Castle Hill for the pub being there. But as I say, even though it's a public house, a free house, getting drunk leads to intoxication and not really knowing what's going on around the country. This is, how things happen. Drunkenness. I don't really particularly think a pub should be on an ancient site like this, the highest listed protection site. And to be honest, I don't really think those trenches should be there, dug out of it. And I don't think that that tower should be there. And that's my opinion. Quite like Emley Moor Mast because it's a nice style and shape. Don't particularly like this tower just because I don't like the design of it, if there would have been one of these on there, I might have liked it just because I like the style of them, because these towers, these Irish ramp towers, reminds you of these, although there are apparently only 2 examples in Scotland, what we know of, and some scattered around Ireland, and they got quashed very quickly, or not quashed by the Normans, but they got absorbed into the model of the church quite quickly. I think Rome was coming over. We've had Rome coming over again, but what I mean, I don't mean Rome. I mean, the Pope, the Catholic Church, is coming over through the Normans and through the French. Not through the Romans. It's a Catholic Church coming over, and whatever Ireland was doing at the time, Ireland was actually strongly opposed to the Normans. They fought vehemently against the Normans, so Ireland plays a part in this as well because Ireland and Scotland both resisted the Normans. Up 1066 didn't mark the takeover of England because Northumbria and Cumbria were still opposed. So I think the Tolkien, it's a fantasy story, but there's a lot of, I'm the sort of person who likes to think about where does ideas come from, where do people ideas come from, where are ideas going. That's my skill. Evaluating ideas, because I'm a person who works with ideas and who has ideas, likes ideas. An archaeologist is someone who investigates the earth, soil, stone. An archaeologist investigates, these sites, and is interested in these sites, in the earth, finding out how old the earth is, how something was constructed, the bones of the people. If you're into someone like Tolkien, Tolkien, I've just sent a message to Jeremy Corbyn as a bit of a joke, really, but Corbyn's just been, he got punished for saying things about Jews, anti-Semitism or whatever, and got taken away from being leader. But yet, Tolkien, in Tolkien's interview, he says that the Jews are lacking in imagination. That's what Tolkien says. So, maybe Tolkien, I really don't think that they're going to be burning all Tolkien's books because he said the Jews are lacking in imagination. If they remove Jeremy Corbyn as leader for Labour Party, why aren't they going to, burn all, Black Lives Matter are wanting to pull down statues of, Winston Churchill. So, are the Jews wanting to burn all of Tolkien's books because maybe they don't lack imagination, because they lack imagination, according to him. So, I'm a person who works with ideas, and I'm interested in, where's that idea come from? So I'm a person who's like, where did he get the idea from? I don't always get the idea straight away where we got it from, but it's clearly obvious. You'd have to be pretty stubborn to say that, judging from the evidence of Tolkien's birth and the building of the tower, and then him moving to Leeds and being in that area, already been interested in Huffington Whitehorse, Will and Smithy, things like that. He's gathering inspiration, and clearly the U shape on the hill and it breaking the I shape, splitting it up like breaking of a ring, is clearly he has a connection with the tower. And a lot of people, I think, probably likely maybe have thought about this, or maybe likely have, might have pondered it briefly. But the thing is, when you're going to ale houses and, free houses and drinking a lot of alcohol, you don't get time to think about that, because ale houses usually make people, reduce people's capacity to think, which is, the question of, is alcohol a good or a bad thing itself? So, that's where we're at with this, and we've got a petition at the moment that's got 3,000 signatures to protect the Greenbelt, because it's Greenbelt anyway. You're not supposed to build on it. The council have brought the rules for Greenbelt anyway, and there's plenty of other rules the councils are breaking. I didn't really want to make this a political discussion, but it's kind of got to be. I mean, even when you're looking at ancient history, the ancient Celtic sites, people study, what was it, the political affiliations and political structure of the country. So my vote is for this being actually a huge long barrow. That's my belief, that it's a very big long barrow, biggest long barrow on the island, and also a hill fort together. Why not? Got all different types of long barrows, all different configurations of long barrows, without chambers. I think this is a hill fort long barrow. And I think the Greenbelt should be protected, and I don't think anything should be built on it. And I think that we should fill in the trenches. But unfortunately, the worst thing is that whatever was where those trenches were dug out of, we've lost now. And there's only been that study by, what's his name, beginning with a V, Varley. Only Varley's excavated this site. I don't know what Varley's competencies or his reputation is as an archaeologist. I like the level of archaeology on this, but, what doesn't really destroy any more of it, of what they've done with Stonehenge, the Lost Circle revealed. I think we deserve that kind of archaeology level on it. And to do that is most definitely not to put any more buildings on there, no cafe, and most definitely not have any towers on there or anything, because they're built over. Well, we need to properly investigate. It's kind of like it's been blocked from investigation. Could this have had a cairn on it, like some of those in Ireland? Some of those in Ireland I've only just found out about, west of Kells, up on the hills. I didn't know about those ones, the lesser known ones. All these ones popping out of the woodwork now. We got the information being passed around. So I actually would like to forward this to people like Crowhurst and to the prehistory guys. I know it's a little bit off topic from what they normally do, is purely on the sites, but it's something that I'd like those people to think about, just to contemplate, maybe in their own time. And, the prehistory guys certainly are interested in ancient sites and the protection of ancient sites, surely. So I think the prehistory guys probably should be interested in this site. They've not done a video on hill forts. When they did the Standing with Stones video, it was all cairns and stone circles. It wasn't hill forts. So, but there are hill forts like Sisbury Ring that mined flint, which are, prehistoric Stone Age, not Iron Age. So, I think hill forts, are important. So I want to pass this on to the prehistory guys to have a think about, and, a few other people, just because, I really would love to know. Really, I'd like to know what the configuration of the roundhouses were on this. When it was in Celtic use, or if there were. It would be kind of crazy if there were any had been any cairns on there like in Ireland, and maybe they got destroyed by the Romans, or I don't know. Maybe they weren't. Maybe you don't have them on. Maybe a huge long barrow with channeling the energy is just to have a village on it with the roundhouses, and it's got certain energy to it, and it's the fact of its location near the Pennines, which in a way is a little bit like it's kind of like, I see it as the good version of this setup here, not the bad version. And they've definitely gone more for the good version at some stage later on, and Tolkien did get his award, even though he wrote the story, and this hill has got some history with it getting dug up and authoritarianism, marks on there, and I'm not the greatest fan of authoritarianism because of what they do to the place, what they're doing to towns, the type of buildings they're building. Fortress building is all commanding of power, and a lot of it, like Extinction Rebellion now are finding out that it's damaging the planet, and these governments are breaking a lot of laws, they're breaking a lot of rules, these councils and governments. They're ignoring Greenbelt, they're ignoring planning rules, and then the Prime Minister's trying to change planning rules, and he's trying to change the borders of his voting, his electoral borders. It's all cheating going on, and I'm kind of sick of it, And when we get his ancient sites ruined, and then you've got Ed Miliband, like I didn't really want to mention him, popping up saying, "Oh, we're going to build more affordable housing, you're going to build more crap houses." When you got Rees-Mogg with his fascist regime of authoritarianism. Mogg's got the money, Mogg's got the answers, Mogg can pay for the adverts, Mogg pays for what we see through the TV. It's a miracle that people like Chris Packham have got a slot on TV. I kind of see Chris Packham as this person who's on the side of nature, on the side of protecting ancient sites, energy that's, new fuel sources that are environmentally friendly, things like that. But then on the flip side of the coin, through the same television channels, you've got all these, Channel 4, line them up and get them naked. It's promoting sex and promiscuity, and they're wanting people to try have sex more and build more houses, and then that's more building, and more countryside is destroyed, and then they want to do it as cheaply as possible. Where, Corbyn and Labour, at least Jeremy Corbyn wanted to have the energy companies for non-profit, for public ownership of Royal Mail and, energy companies and water companies, which is not for making ridiculous money out of us all. But unfortunately, people like Rees-Mogg, the fascists, want to have all the money for themselves so they can keep themselves in the government, keep themselves as the ones who make and change the rules about building and about ancient sites and about... They want to stay in control. How about changing the rule instead of changing the borders of voting? How about this, Boris, right? How about you've only got 1/3 of the country who in voter support for this government? How about changing the rules? So unless you get 50% of people supporting a government itself, let alone a party, then you don't have a government. Or you can't have a government that claims to have a cabinet that is in charge until you get 50% of people in a nation's support or votes. Forget about messing around with your little lines so you can get 1 or 2 votes here or there. How's about you haven't got the support of the nation, Boris and Rees? You haven't. So I say, hand the money over. And, I'm sick of all this economy rubbish, global economy. It's just a load of rubbish so you can continue being in charge and the ones who dictate what the rules are going to be. So that's all it is. Certain people have massive pools of money, billions of pounds, that could build... Forget affordable housing. They could build for no profit but not at a loss. People who've got millions and billions could build beautiful houses in the countryside, separated apart, not all together on ridiculous housing builds. Not at a loss. They could build them for not at a loss and get the money back without making a profit for other people. So, I don't really want to go in political with this, but I'm sick of Ed Miliband popping up on my TV. I'm having to listen to him I can't skip it. And this is what Zuckerberg's wanting to do. He's wanting to block politics out of Facebook, apparently. But yet Zuckerberg doesn't allow people to petition freely and get signatures that could potentially stop these people from doing it. So Zuckerberg's kind of like catch-22. He's kind of like, he's like the good, the bad, and the ugly, and Zuckerberg's one of the ugly ones because he doesn't really know what he's doing, you know. Never give a Mexican a loaded gun, you know. Zuckerberg's like, you know, he's making a really ugly mess of Facebook at the moment because he's blocking people from sending 100,000 messages a day so they can get signatures to oppose Rees-Mogg. But then Zuckerberg's talking about, oh, maybe I might want to block politics altogether from a platform, you know. But then what platform we're going to use to get signatures to oppose him? You know, it's like a dog chasing its tail, really, you know. So I kind of had enough of Zuckerberg and Miliband. I've had enough, you know, I sort of had enough of, you know, Corbyn, really, because Corbyn's the right free speech, you know. Corbyn doesn't want free speech. Corbyn's, you know, supposedly, if anyone says anything bad about anyone, I am always on the side of, you know, not on the side of free speech, on the side of, you know, I want him to be able to make this video if it wants for free speech, you know, but yeah, you know, Tolkien's got free speech, you know, so, you know, maybe Corbyn's, you know, a little bit like the good, the bad, and the ugly, you know, because he kind of, you know, either you for freedom and free speech and against fascism and authoritarianism, or you aren't. You either are or you aren't. And Corbyn clearly sort of, you know, he's chasing his tail a bit because he wants to have free speech, but he don't want people to say this or that about this or that. So, you know, what's going to happen now with Extinction Rebellion kicking off? I don't know. But here's something for you. I know Extinction Rebellion are interested in ancient sites because Gail Bradbrook lives in Stroud and it's near Pegler's Tuff, Dooley Longborough. So we know Extinction Rebellion like and promote the preservation and protection of ancient sites. And clearly Tolkien would probably support the protection of the environment against this factory smog future. So there's a few things to think about, things that I've not noticed that anyone else has specifically talked about in relation to Lord of the Rings and ancient sites that I thought, you know, you should be aware of, at least think about when we're making decisions about what happens to these places. You need to know certain things, and not just empirical evidence about this site, empirical evidence about what was there. We don't really have all the empirical evidence because it's not been fully researched yet. And I'm not the greatest fan of excavation because I think excavation ruins it. I always think in the future that it'll have machines and devices that can fully scan it without you having to dislodge or touch anything. And that's something that modern archaeologists, I think, are a bit childish and impatient about. They want to be the ones who discover it. They want to be the ones who, you know, dig it up and find it out now and get on the programme with a name on the title, you know, and be the professor, you know, or, you know, the curious and eager to find out. There's a lot of things to find out about things without digging it up, you know, and there's a lot of things that I haven't even made videos about yet to talk about too with these ancient sites that don't require or necessitate digging it up and ruining it, you know, like they've done at Cirencester Museum with that one that featured in Indiana Jones film, the Long Barrow. So kind of a bit disappointed about that as well. So I think that's about it. 58 minutes, just nearly an hour, 10 minutes short of an hour discussion. If you add on the talk about the, if I edit on the talk about the Sheila and the gigs onto this, then it's about an hour. So I hope this was at least as interesting as that talk on Sheila and the gigs that girl did for a presentation. So that's it for now.